Your business's success depends on relationships. Relationships with customers, relationships with employees, relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's all really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm super excited to connect with Allyn Bailey. Allyn is a visionary leader in talent acquisition and HR, known for driving organizational transformation, fostering innovation, and redefining the future of work. As the Senior Director of PR, Media, and Events at Smart Recruiters, she combines expertise in brand amplification, experience design, and strategic storytelling to create impactful narratives that resonate globally. With a passion for futurism, AI, and trend spotting, Allyn inspires organizations to embrace change and thrive in the evolving world of work. Congrats on creating impactful global narratives, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you, Karl.
Thank you. So, companies are looking to advance their bottom line, increase sales, and scale their businesses in 2025. What is the key piece of the puzzle that they're missing?
So I'm going to go right to the root of the problem. At the end of the day, all decisions, all actions, whether it's by consumers or employees or just by any human being, is actually rooted in a very simple thing: how we feel, our emotions. And it is the number one thing we are taught early on in our business careers to not discuss or talk about. Let's make this a non-emotional choice. Let's put this in a non-emotional frame. Let's be very analytical about this. But that's not actually how the brain works. And because of that, companies often miss the boat and can't understand why some things are working for them and other things are not.
Yeah, I see, especially in the last decade or so, people get so fixated on the facts and the data and all this, the numbers and the information. And it's really interesting for them because they're already emotionally connected with what they're doing, but they forget that their audience doesn't have the same emotional connection to the product or the service or whatever they're trying to sell. And so when they present all this data, they forget that they have this extra context around the subject and their audience doesn't.
Absolutely. 100%. I love how you just articulated that. That's one of the biggest challenges that people face today, right? When you are part of a company, particularly, let's say you're a marketer in a company or you're on the sales team, right? You have an emotional vested interest in that company being successful, right? For a variety of reasons. Maybe it's rooted in this mental model for yourself, which is around, if I don't make them successful, I won't have a job tomorrow. If I don't have a job tomorrow, I can't feed my kids. If I can't feed my kids, everything's going to fall apart around me. I have risk, right? So that's that risk tension, right? So you've already got this emotional connection and bond. It's inherently viable there as an employee. But the more time you spend at a company, the more rooted you become in the messaging and the frameworks, and you start to become really vested. You're part of the development and creation of that. You have an emotional investment to it being successful. That emotional investment actually creates the dopamine and the drivers that make you feel like what you've done is so amazing that everybody's going to love it, right? I mean, that's not actually always the case. Sometimes we're lucky and synergies happen and there's these big boom moments. But at the end of the day, people are not driven by facts, numbers, and a series of data strings that provide what we would call kind of very analytical decision-making choices. People are actually driven by a very simple formula, which is they feel something. And over a course of time, that things that happen around them create that emotion. That emotion starts to create a series of mental models. Mental models are very personal. They're very hard to categorize by large groups, like to say, this persona is going to feel this way. You can kind of get there, but it's really hard. So those mental models are very personal. They're driven by those emotions. Mental models in the normal speak is why we think the way we think, right? We all have created those. Then once I have those mental models, I can poke on them. I can create moments that pull on people's mental models that will drive them to decision making. and they will take action in certain ways. But all that action is always rooted back in that original emotion that drove it. And emotions are very basic, right? We're humans, we have a lot of words for emotions. We can put a lot of frames around it, but they really fall into some very simple things. Fear, angst, excitement, joy, right? These things those are really at the root. There are these, I feel really good about something that's going to make me feel better about it. And so that leads me into having this positive affinity and alignment, and that makes me feel comfortable. And so I'm more likely to make a choice or decision that way. Or I am anxious or fearful, or there's something that is making me feel like I need to make a choice or a decision, or I've created a mental model about why things happen and then make a decision based on that. And it's fear-based, right? Notice nothing I said in there was it's based on if you give me enough data that proves you're right.
Yeah, there's no, the initial decision is not based on the data. We use the data later to justify to other people why we claim we made the decision, because we want to think of ourselves as rational, logical. We're doing things for good reasons.
Of course.
And that's understandable, but it's not the real way that decisions are made. And companies that want to inspire people to follow a call to action need to hit those right emotions. So I'd love, do you have like an example you could share of a time you've kind of applied this to a business and it made a big difference?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to use from some of our most recent experiences with the company I'm working with right now, Smart Recruiters, and the work that we're doing from a brand perspective. So listen, this idea of recruiting and hiring and the tools and the technologies that are out there to support it it feels like a very logical decision choice. Like I have a set of processes. I need tools to support me to execute those processes. Does this tool efficiently do it, or does this tool not efficiently do it? Is it in the right price range? Is it not in the right price range? So we start going down these very kind of standard kind of business case analysis of why we would make choices and decisions. But what we're finding is in a saturated market, or in a market where there are multiple choices in front of you, at the end of the day, one of the things that most companies have not addressed in this technology sector is why this technology, let's assume everyone is relatively efficient. What is it that makes somebody pull the trigger and say, this one, again, listen to my word, this one feels like it's going to answer my problems. This one feels like it's going to allow me to be successful. And if we understand that that's what they're trying to do, is understand what's going to feel right, right? We make people feel bad about gut choices and decisions, but everything's a gut choice or decision. Once we understand that, really working backwards from that and saying, what are the decision points that happen? The points in time people have to make choices that could determine whether or not they're going to continue on a buying journey or not with us. Once we sat down and defined those, then we worked backwards from there and said, what's driving that decision choice, right? What is the motivator and what is the pain point that's driving that decision point? If you understand the motivator and the pain point, then you can work one step past that and say, if I want people to take X action based on that decision point, how do I influence that motivator for them? And I influence it through what emotion I'm generating. So we started to figure that piece out. We figured out, listen, there's a very early stage motivator that drives people into the decision around a technology choice, like a new recruitment platform or a new, et cetera, people who are making those decisions. And it usually is, what is the sense of angst or risk associated with their ability to feel like they are seen as being competent at showing up in their jobs, right? What that fear and angst moment. So if that's the case, then we start to work backwards from there and build a lot of brand experiences and moments where people who are in those early buying decisions can connect with us to have a conversation and help think about their emotions around risk and angst and grab comfort in the ability to make choices and decisions. When we do that, then we start to see better pipeline conversion. So it sounds very simple, right? We're gathering more leads and we need to convert those leads into more MQLs and then into more sales. But to move them from leads to MQLs, we realized we had to trigger a different emotion from them, which was, I can avoid the fear and angst. I can create less fear and angst by making a choice to explore further and a choice to think about how I can solve my problems better. Right? So that was the decision. It all leads back to feelings and emotion.
I think it also, I like what you said just at the end there, where you focused on the emotion they're feeling at that step to get to the next step, because it's not about just the emotion to get them to buy from the very beginning, but it's like walking them through and understanding the change of emotions along the entire journey. And just you're focusing on step by step instead of how do we get people to buy from the very beginning. You're trying to kind of leapfrog of the whole thing and not acknowledging how they're going to feel along the entire process, and that's going to change. And if you don't adapt your messaging to where they are at that step in the process, then you're going to start losing people. And so I think that's an interesting insight too.
It's super important. And I can tell you the number one failure point I see in sales or marketing processes is we too often jump from lead capture to the sales story, right? So I take all the people I pulled into my lead. Let's say we do this all the time. We're at a trade show event, right? We have a bunch of leads that we capture in from the trade show event, right? And then there's a nurture cycle that's supposed to happen after that, where we say, oh, thank you for joining us. And let's, here's the next part of the conversation. But we, as salespeople and as marketers, we want to jump from, hi, how are you, to let's get married and have 10 children, right? We make all the steps in between, which are required to build relationship, to build connection, to build affinity, to build comfort, to tap into those core emotions that make me trust you, right? Because I make a choice and a decision based on how I feel at that moment, what emotion is driving my angst or decision making, but also how do I feel about you as my problem solver? Do I trust you? Do I feel like you understand me? All those same pieces. I tell people all the time that the most basic way to understand how emotions drive decisions is to think about any core relationship that they've ever had. If you think about a core relationship, think about a friend that you met in college, or think about your spouse, or a variety of other things. There were a series of steps you went through before you went from hi, right, where you met them at a keg or at a frat party, right, to when you decided to go on your first date. And then there were emotions involved with that, right? And there was a spike in our dopamine that happened during those moments, right? And then you start to build this affinity connected to them. And then eventually you move to a space where maybe you're starting to trust them. And the more you trust them, now you're starting to have a sense of love and caring. Those things all come over time and through a moment of choices and decisions that you're faced with, and they build, right? And you can accelerate that build, but you can't eliminate the build. You can't go from, you can, but it doesn't work out well, right? You can't go from high to done and we're all locked in. One of the reasons this is a big challenge for businesses is that when they do that, when they think they can go to that fast leap, most people who are making a fast leap, for example, major purchase decision in the business to business world, but even in the business consumer world, are doing it because, again, back to a root emotion, there's some underlying fear motivator or angst motivator that is making them feel like they need to make a rapid choice or decision. So we create these false narratives, either themselves or we help facilitate that. They don't buy it today, you're not going to have it tomorrow. We have a limited amount of stock, or this discount's only going to last for this long. And it feeds into that angst motion. And they feel like, oh God, I got to do this. And they make the leap and they make the jump. But because they haven't built all of this other kind of emotional affinity up until that point, their commitment to that decision, to that buying decision, is very short-lived.
Yeah.
They're likely to be unhappy very quickly, even if they could have been happy later on, right? But they didn't build that relationship. They are likely to they're not likely to convert to a long-time buyer, and they are often more likely, when they leave you, or if they get stuck and can't leave you right away, either way, to be more of a the opposite of somebody who's going to advocate for you, right?
You're
Now
complain and yeah.
Right now, they're going to get suddenly very loud about the fact that they trusted blindly and got hurt. And then they feel hurt. And if they feel hurt, they get loud and annoying. And now you're wondering why you've got a whole bunch of people complaining about something that's actually probably really good, but they didn't, you don't know how to solve that problem.
That's a great point. And I think it echoes what a guest on a previous episode talked about, was how the way to actually accelerate growth and the right way and to solve these problems is actually to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of rush to the close, taking some time to build the underlying relationship foundations, build that trust on the front end, make sure that when they do buy, it's not out of just like a purely like FOMO, short-term angst, fear response, so that on the back end, once you've closed them, the relationship is you're much more likely to have a long-term, productive, positive relationship that leads to more repeat business, which is great for the company, and the happier customer or client will also be more of a promoter instead of a detractor for your brand and your reviews and all that, and just a less of a drag on your team because they're not be dealing with all these irate, annoying, frustrating clients and customers. So by trying to accelerate too soon and close a deal quickly, you actually end up undercutting your own success in the long term and hurting and basically like eroding your own foundations before you even build them.
Absolutely.
And causing a ton more problems, like probably eat away all the potential profits you'd have made by closing one more deal, get eaten up in the long run by the negative consequences of rushing into the relationship.
Right. You end up losing that win of initial boost with churn cost, with your customer success costs, which are associated with trying to restabilize that relationship. And you lose the ability to gain advocates early on. And most companies, when you build a strong brand and affinity-based, emotion-based connection with your customer base, your ability to leverage and lean on that customer base, or even if they're not direct customers, they are people who have affinity towards you, that goodwill will start to reduce your brand and sales and marketing cost outputs because they are amplifying your brand in the ways that you need to. Because this goes to the next piece, which is only getting larger as we start to look at the expansion of the mental impact of how social media impacts decision making and how people think about references and referrals. And my friend told me this, and my friend told me that, or I like this person, so if they like it, then I'm going to like it, right? I have this trust, because their trust relationships are now people's trust relationships and sense of safety and decision making and choices are now very tied to who they follow, how they connect, how they feel about those people they follow, how they feel about themselves because they are aligned or have affinity for other people. And so that means that's boosting and driving the relationship. So the easiest analogy to that would be, I'll go back to that dating analogy. There's a certain point in all relationships where you go and meet the friends, right? Yep. If your friends don't like the person that you're introducing them to, it creates stress and friction in your mental model about what you think about them. So you may have thought they were fabulous. I felt so great about them. They are wonderful, the best things in sliced bread. And then they come to the first party and they meet your friends, and your friends who you are aligned to, it's part of your personal identity. They turn around and they look at you and go, oh, there's something off there. I don't know about this. I don't know about that. That starts to drive your emotional angst, right? Yep. Which creates friction. It's the same things with brands. It's the same things with business decision making. This same basic strategy works whether we're talking about trying to sell a product or whether we're talking about trying to sell an idea inside a business, if you're trying to build stakeholder alignment and connection. So processes, analysis, having good kind of analytical hygiene and decision making, that's all super important, but it's secondary to that root, how do people feel about things, and what are the things happening in those moments, those different triggers of emotional decision making that are happening to help propel them to the next space or take them back a step.
Yeah. So this has been amazing. So what if someone is going, oh my gosh, I want to start on this process? What's a good like first step, actionable step people can take to start moving towards refocusing on the emotions behind people's buying decisions?
So I'm going to tell you, listen, it's not rocket science. You need to go back to the very beginning, and you need to build an experience. You need to understand your audience journey, right? Where did they start from? What are the decisions that they are making from their perspective? And chart that out for yourself. It sounds very simple, like build a customer journey map. The biggest challenge for people when they build customer journey maps is that it's very hard for us to get out of our mind, our process for that journey. And we go, well, they walk in. So let's say I'm trying to sell cereal, right? Mm-hmm. And I say, well, they're going to see a commercial, because that's the thing I've done. I've created a commercial for them. And then they're going to go into the store and they're going to see it on the shelf, and they're going to look at the price point, because I've been worried about my pricing strategy. And then they're going to pick that cereal, and then they're going to go home and eat it. And then they're going to decide if they like it or you don't like it. And then they're going to tell 5 friends, right? So these are all based on the cereal manufacturer and sales process. It's not based on how the person actually thinks through it. If I do it from the consumer mind, then I start thinking about it a little bit differently. And I go, I've had they have to feed their family. That's what's driving. I have to feed myself or my family. I have to feed them. And my next point is I have to go figure out how to go get the food. I have to figure out if I have food in the house. I don't have the right food in the house. Oh, crap. Now I need to go figure out where I'm going to go buy that food from. And I need to get in the car and I go or order online or et cetera. And then I go and do it. And then once I go and look at it, I'm going to see what my choices are. And I'm stressed and I'm bothered and I have a lot going on in my mind right now. And I'm busy and I'm trying to do this in between 3 different meetings while I'm working online, doing my Safeway order in the backside to get delivered. So my decision points are different from what the business's process points are. So you need to map those. Okay, you really need to think about it from your core audience's perspective. What are the things and choices they're making? And then go in and say, what's happening for them during those choices? What are their motivators? What's really motivating them? What are their options in their mind? Not in your mind. In their mind, they think they have option A or option B or option C. And then what is the option you want them to take? So that's the next step. I want them to look at my brand and go, I want to buy that one. Okay, great. I want to pick that off of the online shopping shelf from Safeway.com. Okay, well, what's going to motivate them to do that? If I understand where they're at that decision point, then I understand a couple of things, right? I understand, they're hurried, they're busy. It's going to be placement. It's going to be, do they have to hunt for it? Is it 3 tabs down? Right? These are the choices. Then you can start to define how you address each of those elements. And you can start to influence decision making. So start at the basics, build a customer journey map, do it from their perspective, not yours, and define out in that customer journey map what are the core moments where they could have made a fork in the road choice or decision. And based on that, what would make them go one way or the other? Which way do you want them to go? And then what are the things that you need to do to get them to go down that path? And those things you want them to do, spoiler alert, are all based on what emotion is evoked in that moment, right?
Absolutely.
Now we can have a great conversation about what should the brand colors be and which cartoon character should be on the box of cereal, because then that's much more based in some of those reactive emotional feelings related to things like, imagery and all of those elements. But they don't matter all the way through. They matter at particular moments.
That is so great. All right. So this has been amazing. Thank you so much for connecting with me today, Allyn. I hope you out there in podcast land enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast. If you'd like to connect with myself or Allyn, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.
Awesome.